Hey everyone, it's Carissa at Sprinkled with Glitter. Thanks so much for joining me today. I'm so glad you're here because today I am participating in a very special Hop for Hope featuring the Essentials by Ellen Courage stamp and die set. Now this was released earlier this year and $25 of the proceeds from each of these stamp set goes to benefit the Breast Cancer Research Foundation. You can see their official seal on the top of the stamp set there. And it has these beautiful floral images along with that very cool ribbon die. So all of this is sold together. And I'm going to be doing a little bit of Distress ink watercoloring today. So I've used a couple of Distress ink mini cubes in Tattered Rose and Worn Lipstick. And I'm also using my Distress Oxide ink pad in Worn Lipstick as well. I just kind of wanted to play around and see what the difference is between the Oxide and the traditional Distress ink when watercoloring. And I'm just creating a couple of watercolor backgrounds. And I started my backgrounds on some Tim Holtz watercolor cardstock. I added my clean, clear water to that and then went ahead and dropped in the color. And I set those aside to dry while I do my stamping. So this is a layering stamp set, and I am actually just going to use the detail images. It might be a little more difficult when I go to die cut, but that's okay. I have some of the detail images mounted onto my mini Misty here, and I'm inking them up with some Distress ink, and I'm spritzing them with just a little bit of water, and that's going to give me a watercolor effect on my images. Now, the more water you spray, the more watercolory your images are going to look. The less water you spray, the less kind of blown out and watercolory they're going to look. So I used Worn Lipstick and Crushed Olive, and then I turned my cardstock. I used Worn Lipstick and Mowed Lawn, and now I stamped these in some Tattered Rose, and I went back in with the Worn Lipstick just in the center of those images and restamped to kind of give a variation of color. So once I have all of my images stamped, I went ahead and placed my dies on top of the stamped images there, and I'm running this ribbon through on these watercolor backgrounds that I created. I was able to create 4 of the ribbons from these 2 watercolored backgrounds, and then I cut out my detail images there. You can see some of them aren't perfect because I didn't use the solid base layer, but that's okay with me. And on some of these Worn Lipstick ones, I wanted to add a little more detail. So I used the Festive Berries Distress Marker and I colored a little bit on there. And then I just kind of added that watercolor look using my water brush to kind of blow those out a little bit or like dilute them out. I don't know what the word is. So I went back and I stamped the centers. I drew in some little center stems on my greenery. And you saw when I stamped the centers, I actually dropped my block onto my flower, but I was able to salvage it by layering another flower over the top of it. So I just created my arrangement here and I mounted it on top of one of those watercolor ribbons that I created, which I think are just beautiful. And I am going to spritz these using the Sukanyeko Shimmer Spritz Sparkle Spray, or it has all those words in it. I'm not sure what the order is, but I will have it linked in the description below, so be sure to check that out. And when you're spritzing that shimmer spritz, you want to make sure that you are not oversaturating the images or the watercolor will bleed out even more. If you want that effect, that's totally fine, but just keep that in mind that Distress inks will reactivate with water. So you want to be careful how much moisture you're putting on top of them once you've achieved the look that you want. So I've cut those ribbon out of some fun foam as well to give these some nice solid dimension, and I adhered them using some Tombow Mono Multi-Glue. And now I'm using the Essentials by Ellen Mirror Mirror stamp set. I'm using that sentiment, Be Brave. And what I've done is I've gone ahead and mounted that onto my acrylic block that has some grid lines. And I've turned my paper at an angle. Now, every time I stamp this, I'm going to make sure that that straight line on my acrylic block lines up with one of the straight lines on my grid mat, and that's going to help me keep a consistent angle as I stamp this kind of all over the bottom portion at an angle. So I mounted the stamp actually straight onto that grid block, and I turned my paper, and like I said, I'm just using that grid block and my grid mat to make sure that I keep a consistent angle. So as I was playing with the layout, I felt like it needed a little something extra. So I grabbed my Gansai Tambi Starry Night palette here. I'm using the light gold watercolor from this, and I've just kind of activated that watercolor using some water, and then I'm using a block to just kind of flick that onto the background just to add a little gold detail. And now I'm taking a mini action wobble and I'm putting it on the back of my ribbon. This is going to give it lots of movement when I mount it to the card. And I went ahead and took that gold watercolor and kind of painted the edge of my ribbon as well, just to give it a little something extra and a little kind of pop off of that paper. So you can see I'm just going around the edge and just lightly kind of brushing that around the edge. And I took my card front and I actually trimmed 1/4 inch off of it. Just as I was playing with the layout, I felt like it made more sense. Now I'm also using this Essentials by Ellen United We Flourish Poppy Field stamp set. This was designed by Altenew exclusively for Ellen Hudson. And I'm going to use that I Admire You sentiment and heat emboss it onto some light gray cardstock. So I prepped the surface with my powder tool. I stamped it in some Versamark ink. I coated it with the Wow Rich Pale Gold Ultrafine Embossing Powder, and then I heat set it. And now I'm going to take this sentiment strip and just mount it on an angle on my card front here. And this card front, as well as the other one, are made from some Neenah Solar White 80-pound smooth cardstock. Once again, I took it over to my trimmer and I trimmed off 1/4 inch off the front of that card front. And now I'm going to kind of play with a little bit of gray cardstock on that first card front as well. So I'm building 2 cards as we go along here, so it kind of skips back and forth, but you're going to see a lot of things that I do to one, I'm going to do to the other. But I'm going to keep them slightly different in the sentiments, and then there's stamping on the first one. And you can see when I add those ribbons to the card front using that action wobble, it adds so much movement, and I think it's so much fun. It's like, hey, look at me, I'm a pink ribbon. It just draws some attention to it and makes it kind of fun. Now, while I finish up these cards, I just wanted to talk a moment about October. October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and we are kicking it off with this special Hop for Hope blog hop, just bringing some awareness to this cause. This is a very special cause to me. I know it has affected my life personally. My grandmother had breast cancer. They were able to treat it, and she was a survivor, and I'm so grateful for that. But as time goes on, we're finding that we need more sophisticated treatments, and we need to continue our research so that not only can we treat this disease, but we can prevent this disease for not only ourselves, but for future generations. And I think it is so important. Now, I do want to mention that for each of these Courage stamp sets sold, $25 of the proceeds go to benefit the Breast Cancer Research Foundation. This is an officially licensed Breast Cancer Research Foundation stamp set. So you can feel good about your purchase, and you can have a great stamp set also. So I'm just finishing these cards off here. I added some sparkle with some sparkling clear sequins on the front. And I also added a little bit of gold embossing along those left edges just to tie in the gold a little more. And here's a look at the completed projects. They're so beautiful, so much fun, and I just think a great way to bring attention to breast cancer research and awareness. Thank you so much for watching today. As always, I will have links to the products used in these projects in the description at YouTube, as well as over at my blog at sprinkledwithglitter.com. Head on over there because I'll have more still shots, more information, a complete list of the blog hop participants for this very worthy cause, this Hop for Hope. I hope you enjoyed these projects. If you did, be sure to subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss any of my paper crafting video tutorials. As always, thanks for stopping by, thanks for watching, and until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day.